You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Hey, Los Angeles, what is going on? Welcome to the LA Football Show here on LAFBnetwork.com or on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you all for tuning in and making us a part of your day. I'm your co-host, Ryan Dyer, joined as always by the madman Jamal Badney. This is going to be your RamsHouse segment of the LA Football Show, talking all things Rams, and we got a fun segment for you all. Here we are in the dregs of the offseason, but the show goes on, and as always, it goes on with my good friend Jamal. What's up, brother? How we doing?
Doing well, Ryan. Excited to be playing our fun PreSeason Awards show here, and excited to be talking with the Ramily. And never a dull moment in Rams land in terms of discussion, and I'm sure this is going to be another rich one.
That was the phrasing I was looking for when we did our Charger show last, PreSeason Awards show. So there we go. Thank you for spinning that out. So yeah, we went ahead and put together a preseason watch list, if you will, and which players will match this categories. We won't get into it quite yet, but I'll let you all know the categories. So we got breakout player, comeback player, the MVP, a surprise star, a surprise cut, a make or break season, and the rookie we are most looking forward to. Rams have a lot of them, so a lot of options to choose in terms of the rookie category, which should be a lot of fun. Show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Gets you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. NHL and NBA championships begin this week, or depending when you listen to this, have already started. But you can bet on all the big games at BetOnline. Make sure you use that promo code BELIEVE. Get some free money to play with, and tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. So, Jamal, any life stuff you want to chat about before we jump into it, or should we just get right into this Rams preseason list?
Hey, ball is life, and life is ball. So, let's do it.
Okay, well that'll give me a few minutes to start with before we get into Rams. Since you said ball is life, I finished the Ted Lasso season.
Don't ruin
series.
Anything for me.
I won't ruin anything.
I'm five episodes into season 3. Don't say anything.
I will not ruin. No spoilers. What I will say though, it's one of my favorite shows I think ever. It came out at like the most perfect time. It was like what the world needed. I remember it dropped during the pandemic in the summer. I started watching it. My wife went back to work. I was still fully remote, and Mia had just come home. So she was 4 months old, and I saw it like on the Apple TV. I'm like, oh, let's give this a shot. And so that was kind of our first like little baby in dad's arms, just watching Ted Lasso, and just fell in love with it. And it's a sad day. It was one of those, again, no spoilers, but I could see why they wanted to end it after 3 seasons, just because I think the story ended so beautifully. It didn't feel like dragged on. But at the same time, there's so much more they could have done. And it's just such a good show. You hate to see it end, but it was so good. I'm glad you're almost done with it, so we can talk more about it.
It's a great one. And I think you said it best there that, it came at the time the world needed. And, what's interesting, Ryan, is, I feel like you're kind of LAFB's Ted Lasso. There's a lot of Ted Lasso to Ryan Dyrud as our fearless leader, and someone who always looks at things in a positive way and always sort of brings his best self to everyone else, sometimes even at his own expense. And so, that analogy is certainly not lost on me. And I think, Ryan, ironically enough, while you were wrapping up Ted Lasso, the night before, I had another, complete experience there. I wrapped up Succession. And
no spoilers.
To me, that was just an absolutely epic show. I mean, in every way, shape, or form. So, I mean, it's still kind of staying with me, that ending. And, the one thing I will say, no spoilers, of course, is that episode 3 of season 4, it was only the second time ever Rotten Tomatoes gave a particular piece of television a 10 out of 10. And the only other time in the history of television from a Rotten Tomatoes lifetime perspective was the finale of Sopranos. So it just tells you kind of the quality of show. And I think both of those shows share a very similar parallel that I hope now becomes more the norm in Hollywood. And that is go out on top, do do the MJ with the Bulls, do Elway, don't drag it out more than it needs to, because I think that was some of the, criticisms with some of the shows of just the very previous generation to this, or like the kind of the pre-pandemic, like the Homeland, for instance, comes to mind. It was such an epic show, season 1, season 2, and then it dipped, and then it came back at the end, and there was this trough behavior with a lot of the shows in 16, 17, 18. And I think on the other side of the pandemic, whether it was for cost reasons, whether it's because there's so many streaming options available, because the attention span is getting even lower in society, which is an even more scary thought. But for whatever reason, I think this approach of saying, hey, the story arc, beginning, middle, end of 3 seasons or 4 seasons, that's really the sweet spot. And, it's like Seinfeld said, the art of great showmanship is always leave them wanting more. And so it's great to see these shows kind of go a little bit shorter. White Lotus is another great example where they're sort of broken it down season by season. So I'm really starting to like what I'm seeing from a Hollywood content perspective moving forward. But 2 iconic shows that we will remember for a long time, both happening at the same time.
Yeah, this is the show I first thought of when you said that this dragged a little too long. I don't know if you ever watched House of Cards.
House of Cards. And I was thinking of it when I was saying Homeland and the House of Cards. Absolutely another epic first season and a half, and then the bottom fell out there, and then they sort of recovered at the end. But House of Cards and Homeland in particular, that mid 2010s, it just go out with the 3 seasons, 4 seasons, and man,
even one like the other show that I don't know if you guys have watched Yellowstone, and then we'll get to Rams talk, I promise. But Yellowstone right now
this is more interesting than the Rams roster, frankly. But Yellowstone a little bit we've watched, not quite as much.
So where it's at right now is like it's season 5, but it's one of those, since it's live television, it's streaming on like Peacock and Paramount, but it's technically like live releases. Yeah. It's season 5, but they're on a break, and they're going to do second half of season 5 sometime this summer. But it feels like it's at that point where it might be best to like end it at this season. Like then you're just dragging stories on too long, and it's just going down the weeds. And so I think I agree with you. Hopefully, I kind of hope they end it as much as I love it, as much as I hate to see it go. It's at that point now. And then just last thing I'll say about Succession, we just started that, so I cannot wait now to get caught up on that one, because I've heard nothing but phenomenal things about that. So the other
Succession and Lasso, I'll tell you, Ryan. That's like, had Brady retired in 21, that's Succession, or, obviously Elway retiring in 98, that's Ted Lasso. You go out and the MJ with the Bulls. That's Ted Lasso and Succession. The Homeland and House of Cards felt a little Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers to the Jetsy, So that's sort of what it feels
or
like.
Michael Jordan to the Hornets.
Yeah, exactly. The Wizards. Yeah, exactly.
Wizards. That's how unremarkable it was. So, and then the other show, last thing I'll say, have you watched Shrinking yet?
A little bit. Yeah.
That's just first season just came out, but that's another phenomenal one.
Yeah. We're having like 2 episodes in or something. Yeah.
So good. And it's all filmed in Pasadena, which is kind of cool. So anyway, on to the Rams preseason awards, and we're starting with our Rams breakout player in 2023. So my friend, I'll let you go first. Who's your Rams player that you see breaking out this season?
Ryan, I think this is a combination of a guy who showed flashes in 22, had some really highs and some lows, and kind of learning the ropes. And I think it combined that with, the void, in that part of the team and in that position group in particular. And I think the perfect convergence of both of those things. I've got Kobe Durant as my breakout player in 23. Obviously last year kind of came on, 22 tackles, a sack, the 3 interceptions that we all remember. Really demonstrated a great deal of competitiveness and a willingness to kind of go up against, guys that, for lack of a better phrase, he was hitting above his weight in 22 in a lot of ways. Had some really nice moments, got burned quite a bit. But I think the combination of him now putting it together in year 2, having a training camp, knowing what the system is going to be, and you couple that with the departure of Jalen Ramsey, there's really a void in the secondary group of who's going to really kind of take it over, galvanize it, make it their identity. And I think Kobe Durant has a prime opportunity here to be the Rams breakout player in 23.
Great one. Love Kobe Durant, the prospect that he is, and, a very good beginning season, beginning of his career. And now with Jalen Ramsey gone, like he's going to be that back into the defense. Him and Jordan Fuller are going to be the two guys that the Rams have to rely on if this team is going to see anything close to 6 or 7 wins and beyond. It's going to be up to a guy like Kobe Durant. So definitely think that's a great choice for breakout player. I went offensive side of the ball, and I went Kyron Williams. And to me, it was kind of an obvious one just because, drafted with a lot of hype, even though he was a mid-round pick, but there was a lot of hype with him coming out of Notre Dame, and then the whole Cam Akers saga happened last year of being benched, essentially, trade rumors, but then coming back. He is back this year, but what is his role actually going to be? He hasn't got a contract extension. Will he get a contract extension? So I think Kyron Williams is really going to have to seize the mantle, if you will, and become that true 3-down running back for the Rams. And also because, they drafted a really talented guy in, oh man, help me out. I'm drawing a blank. Get out of Ole Miss. Zach Evans. There we go. Zach Evans.
Oh, Evans. Sorry. Yeah.
Drafted Zach Evans, who's, obviously going to be a talented player, is going to be pushing for playing time as well. And so Kyron Williams is going to have to seize that role and at minimum hold on to that RB2 spot and potentially take over RB1 when Cam Akers is gone. So we'll see as these training camps and mini camps and stuff really get going, kind of what his role is. But I would not be shocked if by, week 4, 5, 6, if he's your RB1 looking at the future.
Ryan, it's the thing we've been expecting now for the better part of a year, because I think if you rewind the clock and you look at our conversation this time last year in the summer of 22, we were basically talking about the possibility of Kyron Williams being the starter midway through the season. And so I think I completely agree with you. I think he's on the cusp of really playing a huge role. And I think the combination of his injury forced, the Rams to have to sort of make amends with Cam Akers, at that time during the bye week and kind of retool his role and make him a much bigger part of the team. But I think the fundamentals, the bones of, this pecking order are ripe for change and disruption. And I think Kyron Williams just has more spring in his step. He's a combination of power and speed. He's younger. I think he's just going to bring a burst and a new energy to this offense that is desperate for it, with a group of veterans and a group of lesser known guys. So completely agree with you there. And let's see what Kyron Williams can do. Yeah.
The first step is just not getting a non-contact injury in minicamp. So that'll be the first step for Kyron Williams. That's to break out. Step.
It's like, it's a different first step than in the NFL. It's like AA is like, you got to admit you have a problem. And with Kyron Williams, it's like, just, make it through, the stretching exercises, so like, let's get there.
Let's get the pads on. Let's get the pads on.
Let's get the pads on.
If we can get the pads on, we'll see what happens and we'll see you break out. So Rams comeback player of the year. There's 2 very obvious choices. I mean, really, there's a litany of options because of how injured the Rams were. So I'm curious to see what direction you went. So who's your comeback player of the year?
Well, the cheeky answer is, the Rams organization, to sort of come back in 2023 after taking an extended vacation. But the straight line, and I think the one where I think this feels much more comeback player is Cooper Kupp. And I think that, for a variety of reasons, obviously the obvious being he was injured and coming back and whatnot. But I think to me, it's a little bit deeper in terms of perception. And he was unquestionably the best wide receiver in football in 2021. He started that way in 22. Then there was obviously this love affair with Jefferson and Diggs and Jamar Chase and some of these other guys. And then the combination of him getting hurt, combined with not being as fresh a narrative in 2022 has sort of made people forget about Cooper Kupp. And now you start seeing conversations, you start seeing preseason lists of who's the best receiver. And in some cases, Cooper Kupp's out of the top 5. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And so to me, not only in terms of his importance to the team, but I think there's a reminder opportunity here that Cooper Kupp is still arguably the best wide receiver in all of football. And it's going to take about 3 or 4 weeks for people to remember that again. Yep. And it's a shame that they're going to be forced to be remembered again, but they will be. And for those reasons, I think Cooper Kupp just feels, and when you think about comeback player and that award, what is the ethos and the essence of that award? To me, it just feels Cooper Kupp in 2023.
Yep, I totally agree. I toyed with the idea of Aaron Donald, obviously injured as well, and he's obviously a very acceptable answer for this exercise. But I think to everything you said, which I'll double down on, is even with Aaron Donald's injury, even with the disaster that was the Rams season, Aaron Donald is still considered the best defensive player on the planet, at least for sure at his position. I don't think anyone's going to question him coming in, that he's going to be fully healthy, good to go, and will be the wrecking ball that he is. Whereas everything, like you just said, Cooper Kupp is like, I've seen him out of the top 10 in some lists, which is just so disrespectful not only based on the season he had winning the Triple Crown in 2021, but he was on pace, Jamal, in 2022 to match or beat those numbers in 2022. And this was in a losing effort. This was in having no other offensive help outside of himself through 7 games before he got hurt, or 9 games before he got hurt. And the fact that was just all forgotten because he missed the back 9, if you will, is reason why I think he might win comeback player of the year in the NFL as an entirety. And just remind people that he is, if not the best, he's 1B or 1C in terms of wide receiver talent. And he may only be there for another year or two. He's getting older in age. He was older when he was drafted coming out of the small school. So it may only be another year or two where he's as elite as he is, but I think this is still a year where he can definitely do that. So no brainer for me that he's their comeback player of the year and will show the world once again that he is the best receiver in football and quiet the naysayers. Not that he cares. I know that doesn't matter to him. He just wants to win, but it matters to me. It's unbelievable how he's just forgotten already after missing, 8 games.
No, completely agree, Rye. I think we've said what we've needed to say for Cooper, and I completely agree with you. I think when it's all said and done, he's going to be the 2023 NFL Comeback Player of the Year. Yeah,
100%. And there's a lot of good players that will vie for that award, but I think he gets the job done. So, all right, Rams MVP. I won't even say anything. Just who you got for your MVP in this season?
Ryan, we sort of had this conversation with the Chargers in another segment here. And again, you sort of think about it in a number of different ways. I think with the Rams challenge, it's, if you can name 53 guys, you're ahead of the curve right now. But
name 22, you might be ahead of the curve.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the number of candidates here, it's small. But having said that, in the modern NFL, in terms of who the head coach is, in terms of what the system is, what the expectations are, if this isn't Matthew Stafford, it's another disastrous season. And you and I have sort of talked about this team even kind of retooling. They're going to find themselves 8-9, 9-8, 10-7. I think that's where this is going to be at some point. And I think it's predicated upon Matthew Stafford putting together not just a fully healthy season, but where he is closer to the Matthew Stafford of 2021 and earlier in his Detroit days. Because if it's anybody other than Matthew Stafford, if it is, look, we saw what Cooper Kupp as team MVP looked like in 2022. I mean, people forget Cooper Kupp still played 9 games last year, was leading the NFL in yards, in receptions, was very close to the lead in touchdowns, and the Rams were 3-6 and didn't have a pulse. And so, we've seen what it sort of looks like when Aaron Donald is the best player on this team, when he is the MVP of this team. But at the end of the day, he's an interior defensive lineman that can only control so much of the game. So, I mean, just logically, this has to be Matthew Stafford. I think it will be Matthew Stafford. And I think he's going to be really excited to be in kind of an underdog place again. I think what's interesting with him is I think he's more of in a Detroit environment with the Rams culture and the Rams resources. And I think that's a beautiful marriage to be in. He's been the underdog. He's been kind of flying under the radar so much in his career. Then he gets the big spotlight with the Rams. I think the spotlight got a little bright last year as well. Obviously, there was some bad luck with injuries and whatnot, but I think the spotlight got a little too bright for a lot of Rams last year, just being this hunted. Now you get to kind of slide back in to be a little bit of an afterthought in the division, be flying under the radar again. But now with the Rams coach, with the Rams culture, with the Rams resources, I think this is prized to be a really great year for Matthew Stafford in 23.
Couldn't agree more. We're 2 for 2 on this Rams ones because I have Stafford as well out of necessity. I think he absolutely can be the MVP of this team but more so needs to be, as everything you just said, in order for this team to go. If this Stafford either gets injured or plays very, very poorly, then this team is in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes in 2024, and they're winning 3 or 4 games maybe at best. But if he plays as we saw him play in 2021 and some of his earlier days in Detroit, then as we've said, this could be an 8, 9, 10 win team just based on the core they have and what they're able to do if Sean McVay gets back to his wonderkind-like coaching ability.
Ted Lasso reference right there. What's up?
Hey, you snuck Cheeky in earlier, so I had to get wonderkind in there at some point too. So starting the podcast off right. But yeah, and Stafford's going to need to do that. And I think similar to our Cooper Kupp discussion in the disrespect factor, I think that absolutely plays in line here for Matthew Stafford as well. A guy that threw for over 5,000 yards in that 2021 season, playoffs included, threw for over 40 touchdowns and, really had a career type season. And last year, obviously the wheels fell off. He gets injured. And I've seen people not even having him top 10 in the NFC, a conference that has no quarterback talent outside of Jalen Hurts and Matthew Stafford. So the fact that he is getting dropped that low behind guys like Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott and others that shall not be named is that plays into this, I think, disrespect that I think, as you alluded to so perfectly, the Rams are going from the hunted to now this disrespected team that is just 2 years out of a Super Bowl that can become the hunter yet again and prove why they got there 2 years ago and why they can compete even with this overhaul of a 2023 offseason. So Stafford's going to be your MVP for the Rams in 23.
Love it, Ryan. Completely agree. And I think, that's where it needs to go.
Yep, absolutely. So, all right, moving on down, surprise star. Now, there's a lot of options here because there's a lot of surprises on this roster. So we basically covered the players that everyone knows. We haven't had Aaron Donald yet, but we've talked about him. So now it's anyone's guess where these next three go in this category. Who's your surprise star in 23?
So Ryan, it's the guy who I was most excited about that the Rams drafted. And, this is a position group that we've talked about a little bit, but I think that there is so much room there. And I think context really matters. And I think competition really matters. And it's Travius Hodges Tomlinson. And, the 2022 Jim Thorpe Award winner, 2-time, first team All-American, 3-time All Big 12 first team. This is a true sort of shut down corner, just a dude back there. As much as Kobe Durant, I think, is going to really break out and play a vital role to this team and be a star in the midterm, over the next couple of years. Hodges Tomlinson, to me, is the true potential torch bearer and the torch carrier from Jalen Ramsey to Hodges Tomlinson as being your cornerback one and just the ability to shut down a side of the field. I just think the world of this young man in terms of technique, in terms of skill, in terms of positioning, understanding the game, just all of the intangibles and the tangibles. And I think when you factor in something you mentioned earlier, the lack of quarterback play in the NFC, the lack of great quarterback play, particularly in the NFC West, I think there's a real opportunity for this young man to come in and really make a big impact in terms of shutting down some passing games in this division. Obviously, there's some dudes in this division, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, and just some incredible players that, he'll be matched up with from time to time in certain situations. But I think the fact that there aren't really very credible quarterbacks in this division, combined with the need, combined with that opportunity, to me, Hodges Tomlinson, I was ecstatic when the Rams made this pick, and I'm going to continue to be ecstatic over the course of 23.
Great pick for yourself. Great pick for the Rams. Outside of Steve Avila, probably their undoubted best pick of the draft. The fact they got him in the 6th round was unbelievable. What a steal. I have him in a different categories. I didn't have him in this category, but he did make my list because I think he's going to have such an impact on this team. And the Rams have historically, since McVay's been here, drafted very well in the 6th round, getting guys that make immediate impacts, most notably as of late, Jordan Fuller, who they got in the 6th round of Ohio State, and he's your star safety. And this is just another to add to the list in Tomlinson here, who I think will have an immediate impact, be a starter. And definitely I think will be a star in this defense. You hit the nail there. For me, for surprise star, and more surprised because of how raw he is, less surprised because he's basically slotted to start because of the lack of talent at the position. And I went with Byron Young the edge rusher out of Tennessee. Super freak athlete. Obviously, the sky is the limit for this kid. We've joked about it a lot. Rams love drafting projects. They're the DIY Rams, if you will. They love drafting projects and injury-prone players. And Young falls in the category of a project that needs some development, needs some proper coaching. But the Rams, I think, did a really good job in meticulously kind of adapting their coaching staff this offseason, bringing in some really high caliber teachers, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. So I think he'll get some really good coaching there. Now, how quickly will he be up to speed? That we'll see. But again, because of how thin the Rams are at the edge position, he's probably going to be starting day one out of necessity. And so he's kind of going to be forced to become a surprise star just because he's going to be on the field as a raw rookie. So excited to see him play, though. That's for sure.
No, Ryan, I think that's such a great pick. And I love the DIY. To me, I think the DIY acronym that's most appropriate for the Rams is draft it yourself, given the project. So definitely another DIY situation here. But I think Young's combination of size, speed, the conference that he played at, I mean, love it or not, the SEC is the best training ground for the NFL, particularly in the front seven that there is. And the fact that he had to go up against the Alabamas and the Georgias and play in these big games, he is in prime position to come in, make a big impact, given his pedigree, given the state of kind of the Rams roster on both sides of the ball, but particularly on defense. And then third, you see the importance of a dynamic pass rusher and how that can open up the defense when you talk about being paired on the other side of Aaron Donald. And, on another side of the field, we saw what the great Von Miller was able to do. It's really the thing that, above everything else, propelled them to win the Super Bowl. And so all of the ingredients are there for Young to just become a household name in 2023. And, in the words of Russell Westbrook, why not him? Why not me? Because the situation is set up for success here.
Yeah, absolutely. So should be fun to watch and see how he kind of gets into his role. And obviously coaches like Raheem Morris and Jimmy Lake and a lot of these great teachers hopefully will help and get him up to speed quickly. Obviously they're going to need it. So moving on to surprise cut. This was a tough category, Jamal, just because outside of like 6 players, nothing would really be surprising. I mean, there's really only probably 6 locks to make this roster.
Right.
And we already talked about 4 of them. So who are the other 2? But I tried to have a little bit more creative thought with it. And it's never, I don't want to be rude to, never good when a player loses their job. But for the sake of this, I thought of what has transpired throughout their career. So anyway, I'll let you start. Who's your surprise cut in 23?
Yeah, this was a bit of an anomaly, Ryan, and a bit of a paradox and a head scratcher, because can you even cut players when you're under your capacity for your roster? Is that even possible? I'm reminded of the great line by Danny Glover in Angels in the Outfield when he was being asked about making a change. And he said, well, what's the worst that can happen? I can't fall out of last place. So that's sort of what this question felt like with the Rams in 23. But to me, I think there is a slight surprise cut here. And I think it's Tutu Atwell. I think this is the moment where the Rams organization may realize finally and have enough evidence after training camp, after preseason, that, this just is not an every down or rotational wide receiver. And frankly, the opportunity of having burnt a first round pick on just a pure kind of return specialist that can't really stay on the field, it may just be important to move on. And I think given the way the Rams have sort of approached just their decision-making over the years, and in particular their strategy for this year, the moment they sniff an error, the moment they feel like they deviated from an optimal choice, they cut bait as quickly as possible. I mean, when you talk about exercising the sunk cost phenomena to perfection, I mean, the Los Angeles Rams would be a case study at any HBS, GSB, Wharton, MIT Sloan, you name it, in terms of the ability to optimize on sunk cost phenomena. And I feel I'm worried about Tutu Atwell and the patience growing thin and potentially not sort of showing enough in this phase of the year to warrant a roster spot.
Yeah, it would be. I would call it a surprise, but not shocking, just based on the trajectory of his career so far. Definitely will have a lot to prove, make this roster, even with the receiver position not being as deep as it's been in years past. But you have some young guys that are vying for spots. You have Nakua. They just brought in Tyler Johnson, who I loved at University of Minnesota. Obviously, didn't show out too much in Tampa Bay in that short time, but he was phenomenal at Minnesota in the Big Ten. So I'd love to see what he can do. And obviously, you still got Benny Skro and some of these young guys with the two stalwarts being Kupp and Van Jefferson. It's weird calling Van Jefferson a stalwart, but that's where this roster is. So, would not shock me. For me, this might shock people, but when I look at everything the Rams did this offseason to what they believed was best for them this year, but more notably best for them in 2024 and beyond. And that was eating a lot of dead money this year, but setting themselves up and the salary cap up for 2024. And I see these young offensive linemen that are hungry and cheaper. And I would call it a surprise, but I would not be surprised if Joe Noteboom is the next to get cut from this roster. Obviously that'll incur a lot more dead money, but they're already at $75 million. As you mentioned with the Angels in the outfield reference, what's another $15 million when you're already at $75 million? The big thing with Noteboom is next year, he has no guaranteed money, but his cap hit is $20 million. He has a $20 million cap hit in 2024. So that if they were to move on from him, if say Steve Avila and Logan Bruss can lock up your guard spots, obviously Brian Allen and Coleman Shelton are your rotating centers. You got the stalwart over on the right side in Havenstein. And if Alaric Jackson can play like we saw him play sometimes last year, then you have Tremaine Ankrum and others as kind of a rotational piece. You save that $20 million, you push your cap 2024 into the 80s, and you're setting yourself up for a really nice free agency acquisition next year. So call it surprising, but to me, I would not be shocked either if they decide to move on from Joe Noteboom.
No, Ryan, I think that's a really nice assessment there. And I think it makes a lot of sense when you lay it out in terms of the financial implications from a cap hit, particularly in 24. And Noteboom, I've sort of had my fun with him over the years and months in, sort of where's Waldo and, where's Joe Noteboom and all of that good stuff. So I think he needs to be feeling the pressure and the heat. And I think he needs to be thinking, hey, look, all else being equal, I'm going to get cut next year, just given the finances. So I have to give this team a reason not to do this. I just can't be an average Joe Noteboom. I need to be threatening to be an all pro caliber offensive lineman. And so I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of expectation. And hopefully we see an attitude and a focus from Noteboom starting in camp and going all the way into the start of the season. Because if not, I agree with you. I think there could be some trouble ahead for Mr. Noteboom. Although, he'll find a way to sort of spend his money and, we shouldn't all be crying for him, but yes, trouble ahead for the $90 million man.
Yeah. Well, and even just last point on that, even with how injured the Rams were at offensive line, most likely I wouldn't see them keeping more than 8 on the roster heading into the year. Obviously you have practice squad guys, but when you look at the 8, I mentioned the 5 starters and then Coleman Shelton, they just re-signed. So he's not probably going anywhere unless he has a disastrous camp. And then Tremaine Ankrum, they like a lot. That puts them at 7. And so that's without Noteboom. Is Noteboom going to be your 8th? You're paying a lot, or did Alaric Jackson beat him out enough? Do you want a guy like AJ Akuri or one of these other young offensive linemen that you're developing? So he might just be the odd man out.
Absolutely, Ryan. And, the one guy that, and I know you sort of alluded to it, but the one guy that we haven't even talked about is Bruss. I mean, we were so excited about him, with Wisconsin last year, and he's going to come in and he's going to make an impact, and he's going to find a role for himself on this team. And you and I have sort of expected that, not just today, but, for over a year now. So, when you start looking around, you start looking at roster spot and you start looking at cost per position and cost per productivity, Joe Noteboom, hopefully he saved his money.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that his saving grace will basically be if Logan Bruss is not healthy enough to start the season.
Which is not where you want to be, where, it's like, well, if this guy's hurt, then I think I'm in a good spot. Like anytime you're starting a sentence or starting the season that way, it's make sure that, that Swiss account that, you're not paying taxes on, make sure that's healthy.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, moving on. Rams player with a make or break season. I'll go first here, Jamal, just because I'm basically picking off your surprise cut. And for me, this is an obvious one. It's Tutu Atwell. They kind of go hand in hand, right? This is the year. Is he a viable NFL receiver? Does he fit in this offense? Will Matthew Stafford even look his way? I mean, there's so many questions that need to be answered. And based on those answers, he'll either be a Ram the following year or he won't. And, he still will have 1 year left on his contract, but based on everything the Rams have been doing, I wouldn't be shocked, as you alluded to on the last segment, that he ends up being a cut. So huge make or break season. I'm hoping he has a breakout year. I hope he kind of seizes that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. With his size, stature, and skill set, though, it's hard to get on the field outside of, your 9 routes, your go routes, and maybe some jet sweeps. So he's going to have to really, become more versatile. We've talked about it with the Chargers, that with Brandon Staley leading the defense and Kellen Moore leading the offense, they love versatility at all their positions. What can you do for me in different factors? That's going to have to be Tutu Atwell's mantra. Like, I need to be more than a one-trick 9-route pony. I got to be able to add influence to this offense, to the wonderkin Sean McVay, and allow him to utilize me differently.
We all can't be wonderkins now, Ryan. We gotta be selectively wonderkins.
Well, McVay's one of them. So anyway, make or break season, Tutu Atwell. Who you got?
No, Ryan. Makes a lot of sense there. For me, I'm gonna kind of go with the surprise. I'm gonna go with Aaron Donald, and the reason I'm gonna say Aaron Donald is not because of anything Aaron Donald needs to accomplish from a personal standpoint or a legacy standpoint. We know he is one of the 2 greatest defensive players in the history of the modern NFL with him and Lawrence Taylor. But to me, it's a make or break season for Aaron Donald in a Rams uniform, because I think that if he has a similar season as he did last year, where he was banged up a little bit, maybe misses 3-4 games, not quite an all-pro anymore, I think now when you look at the fact that he's only got 1 more year on his contract in 24, now this starts becoming very attractive trade bait. And, you start really saying, okay, we've been remodeling. We got some of these young guys. Donald isn't Donald quite to that level anymore. Can we package Donald to a contender where he's kind of that last piece to put them over the top? The way Von Miller came to the Rams, is there an Aaron Donald to, a Chiefs or the Eagles or someone of that ilk that's sort of a player away to either be a champion or stay a champion, or Aaron Donald to the Bengals or something to that effect, where then, you are in a position where you can totally sort of lean into this rebuild. So for me, it's either Aaron Donald make, where he's back to first team All-Pro, right at the top of the food chain, Aaron Donald. But if he's not that guy, he can still be a Pro Bowler, but if he's just not that guy, that generational defensive player, gets a little bit nicked up, I think he's the first guy the Rams are going to trade once the offseason hits.
We did a article a few weeks back on LAFBnetwork.com, like a debate article, and it was that very kind of question, like, will the Rams trade Aaron Donald? And kind of got laughed at and almost like hate speech for it. And what are you talking about? And as much as I may not agree with it, this Rams organization, for better or worse, has shown time and time again that they make business decisions, and loyalty is not one of those business decisions. And I know Aaron Donald probably will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Rams of all time. One of the last remaining St. Louis Rams drafted back in that great city. Obviously, the greatest defensive player ever, him and Lawrence Taylor, whether you want to argue 1A, 1B. But as you alluded to, if he's not quite at that Aaron Donald level worthy, but they can still get to a second and a third or even a first round pick for him, which I don't know if they get a first, just seeing how trades have gone these last year or two. It wouldn't shock me if the Rams did that in any way. So I'm not saying I want them to. I'm not saying they will, but it definitely would not be shocking. And fans, unfortunately, need to kind of wrap that around their heads that Les Snead and company makes business choices, and loyalty, as much as they love these players, is not one of those business choices. And so this may be the last year we see Donald in a Rams uniform. Hopefully it's retirement and not trade, but you never know.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's also in the best interest of Aaron Donald, because if he's not quite, the guy, that generational piece that you can sort of build a whole defense around anymore, you want to be able to send him into a winning situation. I mean, look at what happened. Obviously, J.J. Watt isn't Aaron Donald, but he's close. And you saw, from the Texans to the Cardinals. And, at that time, you thought the Cardinals were in a position to make some noise. And so you're going to put that person in a situation as well where obviously it's all about your outcome. You're trying to maximize your utility from an economic perspective, but you're also going to try and set him up for success. And so it doesn't really make sense for Aaron Donald to be a B-plus version of himself on a 7-win team. That's kind of a lose-lose situation. Aaron Donald doesn't really get what he wants, and the Rams don't get to sort of accelerate the rebuild because they're not going to be in contention. So for me, it's make it or break it in terms of Aaron Donald and the Rams marriage.
Yeah, totally. So hopefully continue to make it. We want to see this guy retire a Ram. All right, final category here for the Rams preseason awards. Rams rookie, a lot of options here, Jamal.
Yeah.
You're most looking forward to watching in 2023.
So Ryan, this may be a puzzling one and maybe an interesting one, but I'm excited to see Stetson Bennett. And I think that, just between how decorated he was in college. I mean, last year there was just so much swag. He was sort of oozing the swag with, the hand gestures and the posture and the whole deal. And, easy to have a lot of swag when you have an advantage at every position and you play for Georgia in college football these days. But he had it, and he won back-to-back national championships, and then obviously had some off-the-field issues, and where attitude and maturity was brought into question. And then we saw him in OTAs and minicamp a couple of weeks ago, and he's just lighting the ball on fire in terms of the arm strength. And so I think he's just a polarizing figure. I think there's a lot of excitement in the air a little bit, and I think you never root for this. But the fact that Stafford is on the other side now of 35, banged up the last year, the chances of Stafford missing a game or two are going to be pretty high. I think there's just a reality there of the NFL and his age. So we're probably going to see this kid on the field playing some really meaningful games this season. So I'm really excited to see how his attitude, his demeanor, his talent, his disposition, his decision-making translates from Georgia to the NFL, because Stetson Bennett is sort of the prototypical bust, according to the Madney theorem. I've sort of said this for a number of years now, Ryan. The best quarterbacks in the NFL are not the guys that went to the blue chip schools. They're the guys that took the 4 or 5 win teams in college and turned them into 8, 9, 10 win teams. Whether you talk about Mahomes at Texas Tech or Allen at Wyoming or any of these guys, the only time you saw a guy kind of come from a blue chip environment and be a star in the NFL, and this kind of goes back 20, 30 years, is Joe Burrow. And look at what Joe Burrow did. He broke every record and basically had the best college quarterback season there is. And so Stetson Bennett is kind of this prototypical Matt Leinart, Ken Dorsey, A.J. McCarron, just the guy who had kind of the keys to this dynastic kingdom, where anyone could have quarterback. So I really want to see how that translates and how it potentially holds, but also how his attitude is going to need to change from being kind of BMOC and getting to do kind of whatever he wants in Athens, Georgia, to now being at the bottom of the totem pole in Hollywood and one of the most iconic cities in the country. So I think there's just so much, sort of nuance and spice and deliciousness about that narrative that, Stetson's kind of my guy to watch for. So much fun and great call. It's funny when you look at size, when you look at arm talent, when you look at swagger, when you look at charisma, how they act on and off the field, Rams basically just traded Baker Mayfield for Stetson Bennett. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, like an embodiment of each other, if you will. And hey, Baker, is up and down his 5 games here, 6 games here, whatever. But it was fun football, and so I think at minimum we'll see some fun football with Stetson Bennett. Who was the most exciting player in 2023 was Baker Mayfield for the Rams. I mean, the game of the year for the Rams was the comeback against the Raiders. I mean, which mind you and I predicted that was going to happen, and so. I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, why not? Why shouldn't it be Stetson Bennett be the guy that, you most look forward to? Yeah. And I love it. The Rams said, and who knows if this is coach talk or not, but said he was their guy all along, and that's who they were targeting, and yada, yada, yada. So, that's a great one. It should be a lot of fun to see how his Rams tenure, if they see a future with him, if they see him just as a viable backup, if he does get playing time. But the preseason will certainly be fun to kick it off with. For me, mine's an obvious one. I think I went with your surprise star. I went with Tre'Vius Hodges Tomlinson as the rookie I'm most looking forward to. I don't need to say too much because you talked about him a bunch. I talked about him already. But anytime you get a Jim Thorpe Award winner in the 6th round, anytime you have
the history of the Rams drafting as well as they have in the 6th round, and you combine that all with the lack of depth the Rams have in the secondary, this kid's not only going to play, but he may end up being the leader of this secondary very early on in his career. So cannot wait to watch him, see him prove all the doubters wrong that passed on him because of his size. Being a short king spring myself, as I think the saying is, the young kids are saying, being a short guy myself, I want to see him just absolutely ball out and prove that size isn't everything when it comes to football. And it's going to be fun to watch him play.
No, absolutely, Ryan. And obviously I've talked about him at length earlier, but really excited to see him on the field. And he's going to be a future pillar of this team. And I think really excited to see that.
Totally agree. So you get 3 TCU guys for the Chargers. The Rams go with 2 with Steve Avila and Hodges Tomlinson, and certainly a lot of talent between those 2 guys here with the Rams. So that is going to do it for our preseason award predictions. Let us know how we did. You can text RamsHouse to 31032. You can hit me up on Twitter at Ryan Dyer to LAFB, at LAFB Jams with a Z as the madman, or you can just vote below if you're on LAFBnetwork.com. But for Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dyer. Thank you, Ramley, for hanging out with us. Everyone have a great rest of your week and weekend. We'll talk to y'all next week.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.